Well, I've got a couple of requests to explain a little bit more detail how I made the egg turner for my incubator in that last video. And I thought I'd go ahead and outline the process for you. It's pretty simple and nice and cheap. The whole little egg turner system will cost between $10 and $15 really. The basic component you're going to need to find is what they call a telescope clock motor. Search eBay. I found this one twice now. This is the second one I purchased on there. For $6 after shipping, so you can get them super cheap if you look around. If you can't find a telescope clock motor, anything with a super low RPM would work. Something like a disco ball motor, or 1 RPM motor there. This one's 1/10 of an RPM. Anything under an RPM, even no matter how slow, even if it's 1/200th of an RPM, will work out fine for you. So search around. I found plenty of those style of motors on eBay for pretty cheap. And then next thing you'll need is just a little teeny bit of 1/4 inch ply or thin wood. You'll need one furring strip or 1x2, and they come in 8-foot sections, so that's plenty. They're like $1 or $1.50. And then you'll need some 1/4 inch dowel rod. I bought 2 sticks of 1/4 inch dowel rod from Home Depot. They're 75 cents each. And that's basically what you need for the whole thing. Some glue and a big screw would be helpful, and I'll explain that as I go into how to make the little motor turn dealy. But that's pretty much it for supplies. Okay, so what we'll do first is create the main tray that'll turn the eggs over. Basically what you'll do here is create a little box from the furring strips that'll have little dowel rods going across. The first thing you're going to want to do to determine all the dimensions of the box here is take an egg that you typically, like if you're raising your own chickens, you might have a typical size egg that runs a little bit bigger than the normal egg that you get in a classic carton you get from the grocery store, or it might be a little smaller. So take an egg that's pretty average sized for you, put a dot on it and put it next to a ruler and roll it over until that dot stops there, and it came up to 7 inches of distance. So you only need it to do about half that to turn it over that far onto the other side. So 3.5 inches. I went ahead and did 4 on mine just to, it's plenty. Count for a big egg, or smaller one will turn plenty. And so you're going to want 4 inches of travel for your tray. So you take the inside dimensions of your incubator. For mine, they happen to be just over 13 inches wide by about 19 inches in length. So I'm going to make my tray 4 inches shorter than that, so it has some room to go back and forth. And so I went ahead and cut some furring strips to the 15-inch diameter you see on my little drawing. And when you're cutting the side pieces, you don't want to cut 13 inches like I have. You have to account for the thickness of little boards going over the edge. So what I do to measure that is I just put them next to each other and put the board out there and measure along here until you get to 13 inches, mark it, and cut both of them at the same time. But anyway, that's the basic box. And what you're going to do next, after you create the little box, is you got to have a place for the dowel rods to go. Determining the spacing of the dowel rods mathematically can be kind of a bit of a pain. So basically what I did is, again, I put an egg next to a ruler and determined about how wide it is, and a lot of mine were coming in at 1 inch and just about 3/4, or exactly 1 3/4 or a little lower. So I went ahead and made mine about 2-inch spacing. The thing is, I kind of wanted it to be symmetrical, so I figured out that if I measured the inside dimension here, it's about 13 3/4 inch, and I tried to divide that on a calculator by however many sections I wanted, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 sections, and it came up with like 1.96 inches or something. So rather than fuss about that, what I did is I picked just about 2 inches. I think I took like a 1/16 off or an 1/8 off, and then I measured them out, and the last section was a little bit long. So what I did is made a mark exactly the distance that I wanted, and then the edge of the board stuck off about, you know, that far or something. And I just made a mark over here and then trimmed it, so that, you know, now it's a little bit shorter than 15 inches in length, which doesn't matter. Gives you a little playroom, and I have a nicely symmetrical little spacing, so every egg will be in the same situation. If you want more details on that, feel free to email me. I can, if that wasn't clear enough. But anyway, then what you're going to do after you mark out those spacings, this way, as far as height, I chose about 5/8 inch up because that was just below halfway up the height of most eggs when they're laying down on their side. That way it wouldn't cause the unit to, when it's pushing on the eggs, to try to roll over the top of them. If it's just below it, the force of the eggs while it's pushing, it'll keep the, you know, it'll actually cause a downward pressure. Whereas if you go a little too high, all the pulls are going to be hitting the tops of the eggs, and it might make it raise up and go over the eggs. So that's basically how I did the spacing there. And then you just cut the dowel rods about, like, if you look at this one, actually, let me get one more. If you can kind of see that on camera, I just cut it about 1/4 inch long on either side, so 1/2 inch long, and that'll give you plenty of, you know, and then you do holes in there that are about 1/4 inch on either side or a little deeper, and that way you have plenty to go in on both ends. So all that's left there is assembling that up. I'll do that off the camera and bring it back, but you'll end up with everything nice and evenly spaced. And I'll show you what to do next. So here it is assembled. I just took some brad nails, popped them in there, put some glue in the joints, and you're set to go there. Got a nice square with the rungs in there. You can pop your egg in, and the spacing's nice and tight, so won't allow the egg to turn sideways. That's kind of handy. The next part of this little tray is going to be the guide for the motor, and you basically take a couple of short, you know, maybe an inch or so tall blocks from furring strip that you cut out, and cut a couple of 1/2 inch strips or so of you know, plywood or any kind of 1/4 inch or thin wood, and you're going to create a little gap here that your bolt from your motor mount, I'll explain how to make the motor mount thingy in a second, it's going to ride in, and when it turns it'll pull the tray, you know, backwards and forwards. So in order to figure out where you're going to put this, we're going to have to get everything figured out with the motor first. So we'll set that aside, and I'll show you what we're going to do to mount your motor in your incubator. I guess first things first, to make this funny motor mount, what you're going to get when you have the motor is it's going to come with some kind of little plastic motor mount deal, and it kind of turns around on the arbor if you try to twist it hard enough. That's supposed to protect the motor. In this case, for this application, we don't want that. We don't want to do that. So the way I got around it is there's a little flat on the arbor, and I drilled a hole. I don't know if you can see this, but I drilled a hole in that part of the plastic motor mount and put a screw in there and screwed it in until it hit the flat of the arbor, and now the thing won't twist on that. And there's 3 little screws that came on this little plastic motor mount. So I took a chunk of MDF and drilled 3 little holes in it on the same spot, screwed the thing in there. The hole in the center is for the motor, the arbor of the motor, and that goes in there a little bit. That hole's also going to help you determine how far out to put this bolt. And you want it out 2 inches exactly, so that when it travels in a full circle it creates 4 inches of distance, because that's the travel you want, 4 inches. And then you just trim everything nicely to fit, not much longer than the bolt. I tapered that just so it doesn't want to hit the wall as it spins around in the back. And then you'll take a little square of, you know, like plywood again or something, it's 1/4 inch. And that's going to be for the motor to sit on. I cut the corners, you know, for no particular reason, looks. And you just want it to be deep enough so that, you know, when the motor's turned around all the way, that you have about, you know, a 3/4 inch or an inch or 1.5 inches, it doesn't really matter. I'll show you why in a second. But that's what the motor mount's going to look like, and there's plenty of space. And you'll take these two doohickeys, put them together like that, and use some 45 degree angle cuts out of your furring strip to just glue it together, add some rigidity. And what that'll do for you is you can pop a couple holes here and here, maybe one down there, put some screws through the edge of your incubator, and then it's all set up there. I'm going to go ahead and glue this together and then show you what to do next. So I went ahead and put this together, just put some glue in there. And as far as assembly, a nice easy way, this part lies up against flush with the back, so you can take these little blocks, set them on the table with this piece of wood, glue them, and then pop some nails in there if you have a pneumatic air nailer, or drill some holes and screw it, and then you'll have this thing ready, and you can put some glue along the blocks in the back of the edge of this, and then set that one down on it with it lined up on a table again, drill some holes, that way it'll align it for you. So anyway, there's the little assembled unit, and what your next step will be, I'm going to use this little brass bushing that's towards the, that doesn't turn, it's the metal arbor, silver part that turns, that I'm going to use to right up against the edge of the wood here. I don't know if you can see that, but when it's on the top, that's going to be bumping into the wood. So what we can do in effect is use that as a guide, and I'm going to figure out where the center of the screw is and draw a line across the bottom there with, I don't know if you can see that, but I used a ruler behind the screw and drew a line so that it goes across where that bolt goes through. And this is going to be against the wall of your incubator, and we want this, when it slides all the way back, to be against the wall of your incubator. So you can line those up. I usually purposely go a little bit, have this thing overriding the edge a little teeny bit so that you have a little gap when it's fully back, so it's not trying to push it into the wall. And what we'll do is transfer that mark onto the wood here, and then we'll just draw that straight across. This would be better with a straight edge, or with a square, of course, but didn't have one handy for the video. And then we can measure how far in that is and transfer that same line over on the other side. What is that? Okay. And what that'll give you is the center of the channel that you want to make. So then I take the little blocks here and you draw a line across both of them. I tried to get roughly in the center, but I didn't. As long as I go like this, they'll line up. So I'll line those up so that the line is right on the line that's on the little blocks. And then I can glue those down, pop some nails in, and that'll give me a guide. I can put these and center it, or put them equidistant away from that little line in the center, and now you've got the channel in the right spot so that when it's full back, this will be flush with the wall. So again, just so that makes sense, I transferred the line from here, flush with the back, just a little bit past so you have a gap, and then transferred it onto there. Made sure that same mark, same distance over on either side. I put a line down both blocks in the same spot, and then I'll take them like this and make sure those lines match, glue that all down, and then again we're going to glue these so they're the same distance. The gap is just enough for that screw to go through, maybe a little more, and the same distance on either side, and that'll give you the travel you want hitting that back wall just barely. I'll go ahead and assemble that and show you how this whole thing is going to work. Okay, so I went ahead and assembled it, lined it up with the lines like we talked about, and to determine the spacing here, I just popped the screw in there, made sure there was a little bit of play so I could slide in and out easily, and made sure that it was kind of centered so that the line was halfway in between that gap. Pop some nails in on either end. You're set to go. And then I just used some wire nuts and spliced these cords together. Just took a regular extension cord and plugged it in, and made the motor turn all the way around backwards. And then you can kind of test your fit and see if you did your job right. What you can do is put it into the gap, line it up with the back of the, this is going to be flush against the wall of the incubator. So this will represent the wall, and you should have the teeniest little bit of a gap between the bottom here. It's going to be hard to actually show this on camera. I'll attempt, but see if I can line it up. But you'll get the idea here. So when I do that, there's going to be this teeny little gap. And if you can see that, great. If not, trust me, it's there. And that way it'll pull it all the way around to the back wall, but not quite hit it, so it doesn't put any strain on the motor. And then when it flips around this way, it'll push the tray all the way over to the other wall. And this was originally exactly 15 inches, and my inside of my incubator is about 19 inches. I think it's a little over, but it's a good idea to have some sort of a gap, so it's not just the 4 inches of travel and it hits the wall. So maybe, that's why I shortened this thing up a little bit. Now it's about 14 and 15/16. So, and there was a little bit extra room in the incubator, so I should have like a little bit of a 1/4 inch gap of play on the other wall when it's rotated all the way around. This motor probably isn't designed to run with a load like this continuously. It is designed to run continuously. With a load, it's probably going to heat up. So I would recommend getting this plugged into like a timer, and that way your eggs aren't turning all the time too. If you plug it into a timer you can get from Home Depot or some kind of store like that, where it allows it to have electricity for about 5 minutes once an hour or so. If you give it 5 minutes of electricity, this 1/10 RPM motor will turn halfway around and then stop, and then wait an hour and turn the other half around. So your eggs are flipped over on that side for an hour and then turned back over this way for an hour. And that'll keep the motor life nice and long. You don't have to worry about it heating up, and it'll turn your eggs. You can also program it to turn your eggs as often or as less often as you want. And that's pretty much it. This system can be modified to use any different style of motor. Again, if you have a bigger motor, maybe one of the disco ball motors, all you got to do is move this little doohickey that we put on there out further to accommodate a larger motor, and make the motor mount bigger. So it's really pretty versatile if you have a different motor. So don't worry too much if you can't find the exact same one. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email or message, and I'd be happy to try to help you build one too. Nice and cheap, and they work well. So good luck. I knew I was going to forget something. But anyway, there's a couple things I wanted to tell you that I forgot to mention. I didn't have them, so I couldn't do it on this one, but it's not a bad idea to get some little of those wood plugs. I don't know if I can explain this well, but if you drill a hole for a screw and you want to plug it, they make these little dowel rod insert things that have a little mound on the top, rounded in, and you can drill a hole, pop those in there, and it'll create like a little hardwood bump. If you put 4 of those on there, what that's going to do is decrease the drag, so that dragging this across. Actually, I mean, it's pretty going across this stuff pretty easy. But if you put those 4 little bumps in there, that'll decrease the drag, make it easier to push, so that the motor doesn't have to work as hard. You could even get super creative and put some little bearings in there to roll around if you wanted. And then as far as when you're mounting this on the wall, how high up do you need it? That doesn't really matter. I usually put it about a little 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch above the gap rather than right on it. And what that'll do is, that way if it's up this high, when you unscrew the screw to try to pull this out, it'll give you a little more clearance between it and the motor when you're trying to pull the thing out of the incubator. So that's the advantage there. And if you have a long screw, you can get away with a little more gap and have a little more clearance, so you can get it out easier. Other than that, I think I didn't forget anything else. If anything seems confusing, or I seem to have not given enough detail on something, again, feel free to send me a message. And thanks again for watching.